We have got a lot to discuss as the NHL enters the second half of the 2024-2025 season. We have our first ever NHL Squad cast. Welcome to that. We've got our hot takes and a lot more coming up on the NHL Squad.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show, sponsored by Game Time. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the very first NHL Squad Show. And really looking forward to doing this one with everybody. We're going to have some great hot takes for you all, and we are going to have a lot of fun with this. Don't forget, this is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have our great group of local experts. We have Josh Sperber from Locked On Lightning, Jack Bushman from Locked On Blackhawks, David Morasutti from Locked On Leafs, and Eddie Garcia from Locked On LA Kings. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders. Guys, by the way, today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So as we head into the second half of the season, I want to ask one question first to get us started about the first half of the season. Which team, in your mind, was the biggest disappointment in the first half?
Nashville Predators for me.
Second that.
Yeah. Those offseason moves, and Josh certainly knows about one of them with Steven Stamkos going there. Jonathan Marchessault, I've seen a lot of him when he was with Vegas. Adding those guys to Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi, and they've got talent there. I have no idea why this hasn't worked out. I also have no idea why they haven't made a coaching change. All due respect to Andrew Brunette. I mean, we've seen the NHL will fire coaches at the drop of a hat. So it's, Barry Trotz, obviously the jury's out on him as a GM, but to me, no question, Nashville's the biggest disappointment for me.
Yeah, undoubtedly, it has to be the Nashville Predators in my mind. And to remind everyone out there, I am speaking as the host of the last place team in the NHL who has fired their coach already this season for a group that didn't have expectations going into this year. Nashville, obviously, with all the moves that they made in the offseason, probably the most notable offseason they've ever had in their franchise history. They bring in all these big names, and nothing has worked through the first half of the season. And they don't seem to have any solutions to rectify some of these issues. So to me, we haven't played the Nashville Predators yet from a Blackhawks perspective, but from afar in the West, for sure, it has to be the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, and I mean, just because teams win the headlines and make the biggest signings in July does not guarantee them success on the ice once the season starts. And I think we saw that with Nashville. If I was going in the Eastern Conference, I'd have to go New York Rangers. What do you guys think about that?
100%.
I was going down the same path, and especially with where they have been these last couple of seasons, and considering they do still have the big names at the top, there's always going to be that intrigue with the team in an Original Six market, a big city like the New York Rangers. For them to be, I think they're 20-20-4 at this point of the season, that's definitely not good enough for their expectations.
For me, it's how they've handled this stretch, right? It's like, okay, your team's going through some struggles, but it's almost like everything's gone nuclear there. You trade your captain after pretty much telling them you're going to put them on waivers to force them to allow them to be traded. And then, you give the big money contract to your franchise goaltender. And it's just been, it's just like little by little, things have just been chopping down this giant of the East, right? A lot of people had them pegged to be a Stanley Cup contenders, and they've looked anything but that.
I mean, they did win the President's Trophy last year. It's not like
death. President's Trophy, kiss of death.
Yeah, it is the kiss of death. And yet, the weird thing about the Rangers, they imploded. It's not like some guy got hurt or they just made one bad move. This team self-destructed from the inside, it seems like.
Yeah, and I mean, The Predators and Rangers, I feel like, are the easiest teams to put on this. They were probably my Stanley Cup pick at the beginning of the season, honestly. Like, they're two teams that you could legitimately said were Cup contenders, and now you don't even know if either of them are going to make the playoffs. But an alternative option is actually a group of 4 teams, and that's currently the bottom 4 in the Atlantic Division. David, you might remember that we talked about in the Atlantic Division preview show at the beginning of the season that the 4th spot was pretty much guaranteed for the Lightning, where it was the same 4 teams, the Atlantic, Panthers, Leafs, Lightning, Bruins. They've been in the playoffs. They've had a stranglehold on those top 4 spots. And the Lightning have really stepped up.
Yeah.
Them being in 3rd place at this point in the season is definitely a surprise to some people, but I just expected a bigger challenge from those bottom 4 teams, from the Sens, the Wings, the Canadiens, and the Sabres. Well, maybe not the Sabres, but I mean, those, like, you look at those teams and they had a golden opportunity to potentially, poke through a hole made by Steven Stamkos leaving the Lightning that a lot of guys thought would turn the Lightning into a downward spin. Now, regardless of the fact that has not happened, the Lightning have remained a playoff contender this season. I just haven't seen enough from the Senators or the Habs, especially the Red Wings either. Those are probably the big 3 teams that you would have thought would have challenged for that 4th spot in the Atlantic Division. So I think if I were fans of either of those teams, I'd be a little bit disappointed as well, because at least in the first half of the season, obviously there's another half to go, but there was an opportunity missed there to try and jump on what was supposed to be a Lightning disarray that didn't really happen.
Look, it's going to be hard for me to show any sympathy for any of those teams.
That's fair.
In a lot of ways. But I mean, you just gotta kind of feel sorry for them a little bit, because like they're steadily making improvements. Everyone's saying that these teams are on the rise. It's like, well, look what you gotta take down to get there, right? So that was always going to be the tough task. And look, I mean, you can take your pick. I think the Senators right now were the team that many thought were going to take that biggest climb. Them and the Sabres. I mean, the Sabres have just gone and done what every Buffalo team has done the last few years, and just kind of just can't handle the pressure of those expectations. But the Senators are the ones, I think, they go and they spend the money to go and get Allmark. They give him that nice deal to start the year. He started playing well. What happens? He gets hurt. So I think a lot of Senators fans probably feel like there's a bit of a curse on them with the way everything's been going the last little bit. I'm not saying the Leafs put any curse on them. I didn't do that. I think that's just it just so happens that when you're in this Atlantic Division, you've got there's a level that you have to play at, but it's not just you got to play at it. You got to play it at a consistent, on a consistent basis. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in the water there.
And
well, we'll see how much Detroit gets going now with this coaching change. Obviously, they're on the winning streak. They're feeling good right now. Their goaltending, I'm not a big fan of necessarily, but Todd McClellan's come in. They've got the coaching bump. Can they sustain it? They're starting. You can just feel the relief in that locker room and the enthusiasm that they have going through this winning streak. So can they? They're not going to obviously keep this going, but can they use this to jumpstart their second half of the season and get back in the race? I don't think they've dug themselves too big of a hole to not get out of it, but obviously they got to keep this going. But Todd McClellan jumping in there and getting things going, and that's why we've seen these coaches bumps. It's why it's so crazy to me that Nashville and maybe even the Rangers as well haven't done anything, especially with the Predators. They've got a Hall of Fame coach that can just come out of the press box, come down on the bench, lead the team. But he must really not want to coach again, Barry Trotz, because that's crazy. But we'll see. Detroit is making things a little bit interesting for me in the Atlantic.
And honestly, you look at that whole standings, and it's all pretty interesting. Other than the Sabres, the Bruins are in 3rd place, 3 points ahead of the Canadiens, who are tied with the Bruins in 6th. So, I mean, anything is up for grabs in that Atlantic Division. But again, you just would have wanted to see more from the Senators. From, Laine was injured, and since he got back, the Habs have definitely improved a little bit. But again, you just want to see more from those teams in the first half to try and fill potential playoff opening.
I would put Montreal maybe in a slightly different category than the other teams, just because I think they were coming from a more steep rebuild, and they're a little earlier in that process. So I think that their season so far this year is not a disappointment, where teams like Ottawa and Buffalo and Detroit, I mean, what is Detroit in the 6th year of the 5-year Yzer plan right now? To me, those teams have been, supposedly building for 4, 5, 6 years, and they're still stuck in the mud in neutral.
One other team I wanted to bring up as well before we kind of shift gears here too, the Vancouver Canucks. I know they're still in the second wild card spot out in the Western Conference, and they have only lost 13 of their opening 42 games in regulation, but do still have 10 overtime losses, lost 23 of their opening 42 games. Probably not a panic button situation like maybe some of the other teams we brought up, but there's the situation going on with Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, and all the rumors sparking there, despite the team, like I mentioned, still being in a playoff spot. So Vancouver, I think, has been their inconsistencies and the issues going on in that locker room for a team that was expected to do good things in a kind of top half Pacific Division where you're really just looking at those top 4 teams. It feels like they haven't really capitalized on their situation as much as people projected.
They are off to a little bit of a inconsistent start, as you said. We're going to get to that. We're going to talk about a whole lot more as we look forward to the second half of the NHL season. We're going to do all of that and more coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my other favorite features on the Game Time app, the view from your seat. You go on the app, you get a panoramic view from your seat before you purchase the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So, Jack, you had mentioned the Canucks, and that's another team that I think, like the Rangers, is kind of imploding from within, where you have the Pettersson-Miller thing going on. How should they be handling that? Because do you get rid of Miller? Do you get rid of Pettersson? Do you get rid of both? Or do you stay the course and hope these guys can, sing Kumbaya together a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's what they're trying to do and what they're hoping for. And again, the reason for that is because they are still having some success. Maybe it's not the success they were hoping for, and they're not having that Kumbaya circle like they want in the locker room, but this team still is capable. They still have a lot of strong pieces, and they're probably really frustrated from a front office perspective that they can't just get everyone on the same page and brush by this. Ideally, that's what they want to do, but it kind of just depends on whether those guys in the locker room can come to terms and look ahead and get by this thing. I've kind of talked on some rumors because there was some Elliot Friedman speculation when this first broke that the Blackhawks should be all over this. There are kind of some difficulties in making both of these trades work. JT Miller has the no movement clause in his contract. Elias Pettersson signed on for over $11 million until the end of 2032. He doesn't have a no movement clause right now, but if he were to get traded, or regardless, the no movement clause does kick in next year. So there's complications all over the place. It's not just going to be as simple as making a trade to make a trade because there's a big number involved and no movement clauses. So it's a real hard spot for the Vancouver Canucks to be, and I'm curious what you guys are thinking about with this situation.
One of our listeners, we have a Discord group, and one of the listeners was at the game. I kind of halfly said, just start like singing out "Why Can't We Be Friends" towards the Canucks bench. He was at the 100 level. Like, to me, if you're the Canucks, you got to find a way for these two to coexist, because you're not winning any trade involving either player, because you now in today's day in the NHL, making trades with salary like that involved, you have to make some sort of concession in some way. Maybe the JT Miller one's a little easier than Pettersson, but I mean, you've seen how it can work with these two on your team. I don't know if it's just this situation that's giving Pettersson such a tough time, but yeah, the problem is that market's not easy on it either, and I think they got to find a way.
When they're bad at home, they got a bad home team,
right? And that's the one place you can't be. And Eddie, you probably have seen it many times. Just like with that Pacific Division is not easy. You got a bunch of really good teams. You look at the lineups you're going up against every night. You're telling me you're better off if you don't have either one of these two players on your team going forward. I'm sorry. If I'm Vancouver, you got to have like a kumbaya circle in the middle and get these two to figure this out.
And that's especially the case when you look at the position that they're in the standings. I mean, you just mentioned how difficult the Pacific Division are in, and Vancouver's teetering on the edge of a wild card spot right now. So they shouldn't be giving up some of their star players. They shouldn't be giving up their second and third leading assist providers this season. They should be, if they're trading anybody, they should be giving up prospects and stuff, long-term rentals or something like that, expiring contracts, whatever it is. They should be giving up disposable players to try and get another difference maker to help push them over the edge, help get them in a playoff spot. Because when you're in a position like this, like Vancouver is right now, you don't want to be putting yourself on the edge of the playoff race. You want to be making the moves to put yourself in the thick of the playoff race, and trading to one or two of your best players just because they're, they don't like each other right now doesn't, it's just not a good look. So if I'm the Canucks, I agree with David there. Just have them sing Kumbaya in the locker room, have fans sing out "Why Can't We Be Friends" during games or something like that. I mean, there's got to be something that can be done to get these two guys to play together, because at the end of the day, they can help the Canucks win. And if they can't help the Canucks win, then one of them is going to be helping another contender beat the Canucks in the playoffs.
It's almost like kindergarten. You got to sit them down and say, okay, guys, play nice. I mean, it's
take away their sticks, their toys,
Yeah, that's it. That's
take away
it.
nap
Share
time
and play nice. Out of all the teams right now who are in a playoff spot, which one team would you guys say is the biggest fraud, that they just are overplaying what they, what their talent level is?
Oh, I love me some good fraud talk.
I hate to do it to our producer, but maybe the Columbus Blue Jackets, since they're in a playoff spot right now. I would have to say probably them. I don't want to call Washington frauds, but I think the level of success they're having is a little fraudulent, and they're due for some regression. I would say that level of success, they're already up to 61 points in the top of their
They're
division.
riding the OV wave for sure, though.
Yeah. 100%. And I think Carolina's level of success has kind of surprised me. Those would be the three playoff teams right here, right now, that I think have maybe overachieved at least my expectations, but that's what I got.
I mean,
nobody in the West?
Well, Minnesota, for me, I don't know how they're doing what they're doing. And no Kirill Kaprizov. I mean, I love Matt Boldy, but I did not see this team as being anywhere in the top three in their division. I thought they were a wild card team. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but they continue to win, and doing it without a guy who, early in the year was an MVP candidate. I don't know how they're doing it. I just don't know how. So good for them for getting it done. But I would not be shocked to see them, have a bump here and drop off at some point. But good. I mean, they're one of the biggest surprises for sure for me.
For me, it's the Bruins, definitely. I mean, not at the beginning of the season. At the beginning of the year, they seemed like, they were shaped up as a good enough team, but they were the first team to lose their coach, and they have still somehow stayed above the Lightning until last week when the Lightning beat the Bruins at home. And I think, Tuesday night's game is hopefully going to be a time where the Lightning can just sink the Bruins maybe even out of the playoff race with another victory. Of course, that's something that I'll talk more about on Locked On Lightning, but I don't know how the Bruins have stuck in the playoff space. And it's why we talked about what we did in the first segment, why I'm just disappointed in the Senators, the Red Wings, the Canadiens, because, the Bruins, I feel like in a lot of other similar situations where you fire your coach that early, it usually ends up in a bigger downward spiral. So the Bruins have somehow kept themselves afloat. I just think that is going to be the first playoff domino to fall out of the playoff race.
To me, their minus 26 goal differential screams biggest fraud right now in this playoff race. Like, look, again, I know it's the Bruins. Leafs have a disdain for the Bruins that have gone on forever, but
as they should.
It's just you look at everything that's gone with this team season. Look, they still got Jeremy Swayman. He is trying his best to hold this team on his back, even with his backup goaltender being even as bad. but eventually at some point, I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep this Bruins team in line, especially like a team of the Senators are still kind of in it, right? And Eddie, you brought up Detroit, like that's a team that's gone on a really good run too. Like, I don't know if the Bruins are going to be able to sustain it just because those teams might just be in a position to do so much better and leapfrog them. And look, the Bruins also have 3 games and they've played 3 more games than a lot of the teams that are chasing them right now. So there is an opportunity there for a lot of those teams to take advantage and leapfrog them if they can get their you-know-what together.
Big if, but we'll see what happens. All right, we have got more to discuss. We're going to talk about which team that is not in the playoffs is most likely to get into the playoff picture in the second half of the season. We've got that. We've got a lot more coming up on this episode of the NHL Squad. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need to hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. So, guys, which team that is not in the playoffs do you think is most likely to surprise and get in before this season is over?
Well, I guess the easy answer right now would be Detroit because they're obviously red hot. I still find it hard to believe with all the talent on the New York Rangers, they can't figure it out and get it going. Obviously, they've got the goaltending, but just the way they've underachieved. We know what they did a year ago. It doesn't always translate year to year, but Detroit's the easy answer, but I just can't. The Rangers have too much talent to be this bad. I could see them getting it together at the right time, squeaking in, and then maybe being a problem in the playoffs. So the easy answer is Detroit, but I'll go the Rangers.
I was going to say the Rangers as well for another reason, because some of the teams ahead of them were just some of the teams we talked about in segment 2, the Boston Bruins, Columbus kind of overachieving there. I think there is a good chance, just given the talent that New York has with some of the teams ahead of them overachieving. I think they have good enough talent to go on that run down the second half of the season to sneak their way in.
Yeah, I'm going to go with either the Rangers or the Penguins. I think that, the Bruins are pretty vulnerable, but I don't think that the Senators, the Canadiens, the Red Wings are doing enough right now for me to say that, oh, yeah, they're definitely just going to unseat them. Boston's just not going to hang on. Do I think that's eventually going to happen? Yes, but I just think the Blue Jackets in the 4th spot just seems to me the easiest one to drop. I mean, that just doesn't seem like a playoff team to me. And I think that, the Penguins have good veteran experience and they've been, putting some nice games together here and there. I'm still going to go with the Rangers. I agree with Eddie. I think that team is just too talented to just miss the playoffs entirely. And I think that at some point, something's just going to click, whether it's Shesterkin getting back fully healthy or, one of the few players that they haven't moved yet turns into a star. There's enough talent on the Rangers team that I think that in the long term, they're going to be back where they should be, and that's in the playoffs. Do I think they get over top of Carolina? Maybe not, but I think that 4th spot in the 4th spot in that division, in the Metropolitan Division, is going to change before probably the trade deadline, honestly.
Out west, just to give a team out west, I think the West is a little bit more going to go to how we kind of expect with the big name teams out there. I think the St. Louis Blues could be interesting to watch just because they continue to at least try. They continue to make efforts. They bring in Jim Montgomery. They make the Cam Fowler trade. And that's kind of been a common theme for them these last few years. They continue to do everything they can to at least try to make this team better. And they do have a veteran group. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou kind of leading it offensively. I think they do have enough veteran leadership and skill to find their way in should some of those teams in the playoff picture right now falter a little bit. I know they're still at that 500 marker and they've already played 44 games, but if someone were to make a run out west, I would go with the St. Louis Blues.
See, in
as
the
much
West,
as it pains me to say.
in the West, I think the Flames are most likely to come up. I mean, I like what they've been doing. I think that they might not have the most experienced team, that might not have, those eye-popping stars, but I think Huberdeau, Kadri, I think they do a good enough job leading on offense. And, we were talking about the Canucks not really knowing what they can do. And when you have a tangle of two-star players like that with Miller and Pettersson, that can really mess up a team. That can really mess up chemistry. And I think the next team up, the team that's 1 point behind the Canucks right now in those standings with a game in hand, mind you, the Flames are right there. So I think in the Western Conference, that seems most likely. I am a lot more confident if we're going across conferences here. I'm a lot more confident in the Canucks getting their stuff together rather than the Blue Jackets and Bruins holding pat on their spot. So I think in the Western Conference, for me, the Flames are most likely to catch Vancouver.
Quick note on the Flames. Yeah. I just saw him. This kid, Dustin Wolf, their goaltender, he's legit. If he can figure it out on the road, his numbers on the road at home are really kind of drastic. But if he can figure it out on the road, he's a talented young guy. Look out for him. Keep that name in mind.
All right, last question of the Squadcast. Everyone's talking about Alex Ovechkin and the race to catch Wayne Gretzky. If I gave you a choice as a general manager of either Gretzky in his prime or Ovechkin in his prime, who do you build the team around?
Oh boy, you're gonna do this to us?
I guess it depends on what you want. I mean, do you want a pure goal scorer?
You want to win championships.
If you want a pure goal scorer, then it's Ovechkin. But Gretzky makes everybody around him better with the way he can distribute. So, and he could score as well. So I'm going Gretzky.
I'm going to go Wayne Gretzky as well. You'd be hard-pressed for me to take a guy who just with his assists would be the leading point scorer in NHL history. I'd probably go with that guy if I had to choose.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I think, Ovechkin might be the greatest goal scorer ever. But, if we're going cross sports, the way I like to compare Ovechkin to a guy like Cristiano Ronaldo or Kevin Durant, their big numbers, their big additions to the game are going to be in goals. The most, obvious big sexy part of any sports game. And that is what the people notice. Just because you do that at a higher rate than everyone else doesn't make you the best of all time, because as of right now, it's still Gretzky with the all-time goals league. And he's like, 1,000 assists ahead of anybody else. I mean, the overall chance creating that Gretzky does has yet to be matched. So yeah, he's still the GOAT to me.
Yeah. They call him the great one for a reason, because he is the greatest of all time. He's won in many places. So yeah, you gotta go with the great one. Look, Ovechkin is a talent that, we haven't seen, and, the way he scores goals is unprecedented, but yeah, Gretzky, you could put anyone with Wayne Gretzky and he'll make them almost not Alexander or Ovechkin level good, but almost close to that. So I'm going to go with the great one.
See, now to me, I would take Gretzky over Ovechkin if I was a GM starting a franchise. But to me, the most dominant player I've ever seen in my lifetime remains Bobby Orr before his knees got shot.
I wish I got the pleasure.
Yeah.
Would you take Orr over Gretzky, though?
What was that?
Would you take Bobby Orr over Wayne Gretzky, though?
I probably would, because as a defenseman, he could control the tempo of a game, and he probably would play more minutes. I mean, yeah, Gretzky would play 25, 30 minutes a game, but Orr could play that and more. And I think as a defenseman, he was able to control the tempo of the game, and he was better defensively, I think, than Gretzky was. Not that Gretzky was bad defensively, but as far as an all-around player, Bobby Orr in his prime, if they would have had arthroscopic surgery in 1972, I mean, Orr was done when he was 26. I think he played like 20 games after his 26th birthday or some number close to that. I never saw a player more dominant than Bobby Orr.
Yeah, he was special. He was special. So I think it'd be a close. I think that one would be a closer debate than OV and the great one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it would. I would love to see a game between, 5 Bobby Orrs against 5 Wayne Gretzkys. That would be And then you pick your goalie for each team. But I
Right.
think that would be a very, very fun game to watch. All right, guys, thank you so much for doing this. This was a great first time around for the NHL squad. Want to thank our sponsor, Game Time, for sponsoring today's show. And we're going to do this on a regular basis, so make sure you subscribe and join us for all of our NHL squadcasts across the Locked On NHL network. I'm Gil Martin. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for listening to and watching the NHL Squad, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.